Nour, it's really nice to see you today. I'm so glad that you're joining us. I know that a lot of folks out there want to learn about product management. And, I saw your profile and all that you've accomplished. You had an interesting journey. So I'm really happy to have you here today to share your experience. Thank you so much.
Good morning, Nada. Thank you for reaching out. I'm very excited to share my experience and to talk to you about product management today.
Awesome. So, Nour, what was the defining moment where you decided to become a product manager?
Let me give you a little bit of introduction about myself. So I'm a product manager at Instacart today. I have around 7 years experience in the tech industry. Over half of them right now are in product management. I started my career from a technical path. I studied computer science as a bachelor, and I did my master's degree also in computer science. And then I started as a software engineer and test before I pivot my way to product management. So I've experience in larger corps like Oracle, Microsoft, SAP, and I also have some experience in smaller or mid-sized companies like Flip. The moment, maybe just to share some of when was the moment when I decided to become a product manager or decided this is the right thing for me. During my master's, I was doing an internship at SAP, and it was my first time actually doing an internship in an agile environment. One of my coworkers was a product owner in the same team. So it was a new exposure to me for this role, and I really liked it because how cross-functional is that role exactly, and how many people he works with, and how he sees part of that big picture and try to work with engineers to deliver it. It wasn't necessarily a product management role, but that's the moment where I actually got interested in the role. I graduated from my master's in 2014, and I decided that I wanna start my career as a product manager. I tried for a few months, 2-3 months, to find an associate role, but back in that time, it was very challenging to find a local role for associate level product manager or product owner. So I decided to start my way with something I'm more familiar with, and then pivot my way basically to product management. So I started as software engineer and test at Oracle. With every one-on-one with my manager, I would bring that, how can I get product management? But after a couple of trials, I found that it might be a bit difficult to do such a switch in a corp like Oracle, because most of the expectations or even the job posts for product management were somebody who has 8 years experience in product management. So it may not be realistic for me to just wait until making that switch. So I started talking to other product managers in the industry and getting some of their advice. And the advice that I got is try to go to something smaller where you actually can wear multiple hats and get more exposure. And that's when I started interviewing, and I made my next career move to Flip. I also started as a software engineer in test. And again, the same way of expressing my interest to moving to product management. At every occasion, I even started attending all the product management weekly things as a listener, just waiting for that moment and when I'll be ready to make the move. And then one time, a product manager left in the middle of launching a product as an A/B test. So it was my opportunity to just jump in there and get my hands into the weed and try to actually become a product manager. And it was an interesting experience because it's two things. I think it's not necessarily knowing the whole holistic picture of what is product management, but at the same time, all the excitements to go and try to actually excel in this role.
Wow, so that's quite a story. So it sounds like you knew for a while before you got into that role that you wanted to become a product manager, but you had a plan on how to get there. and you went through the approach that would maximize, your opportunity by going to a smaller company and just getting closer to the role and working with people who are in the role. And that was just a very interesting situation where you just jumped in and went for it. Wow, that's such a story. Thank you for sharing that. So a lot of people are confused about what a product manager does. Some people compare it to a business analyst role. Some people compare it to a project manager role. There's some overlaps with a Scrum master. What exactly does a product manager do?
So as a product manager, what you're trying to do is actually understanding your company goals and objectives and where your company is trying to be, and um, at the same time empathizing for your customer, understanding the market and what they need, and internally drive the organization to achieve these goals and missions inside your product. So this is the holistic picture of product management. Now, about how people are confusing about it, I think it's different from, you'll find it different from industry to industry, and you find it different from company to company. Often project managers, for example, are really taking out and not thinking about the why behind doing the work or what we need to build, and they're really focused on like how we're going to build it, what tasks are involved in building that project. As an example, if you think about product owners, they're really supporting a development team internally, helping them with like prioritizing a backlog of tasks or items and clarifying some of the requirements based on the customer needs. The product manager is kind of like a holistic picture of understanding again what your product needs to be successful within your organization, and then driving that product vision forward, whether it's with your development team or with your business unit, business development and sales, or with your support, or with your legal and design. So really understanding what organizations or what departments you have in your company and what your product needs to be successful and driven, and working towards that across the whole company.
Wow. So there's I hear a lot of decision making that's involved, and having some kind of vision and strategy to get the work done. And it sounds like the difference between a project manager and a product manager is you're more integrated within the team, and you're sitting with them to kind of steer the ship and get that product developed.
Yeah. That's
Very nice.
That's part of it. That's part of it. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I'm sure there's a lot to it that we're not learning. Maybe you can walk us through what a day in the life of a product manager is like, just so that folks have a clear idea of what your week is like, what your typical day is like. I'm sure there isn't a typical day, but maybe you can give us a flavor of one of those days.
Well, you already mentioned it. The thing that I also like about product management is that you never get bored. So I don't have any single day that looks like the other. It depends on like what's the priority in your hand right now, and what the teams need support in, or what your products need an immediate support, and you're going to be like driving these day to day. Thinking about a week, and again, similar to the day, there is no typical week, but there are a couple of themes that you'll see from day to day, or like week to week. You'll have at least like a planning session with the engineers, designers, and data scientists. You have 2 to 3 customer calls, either to just explain to your customer how a feature works, or talk about what's going to come in the roadmap, or get their feedback about a feature you're building before you actually build it. Understand what are their main pain points, and how your product actually going to solve these main pain points. There is also working with support to understand what issues are coming from your customers very frequently, and like how would you address that in the product today to minimize some of these frictions in the product. Their work with your data analyst and data scientists to just review the metrics after launching a product and see whether you actually hit any goals with that, or you need more iteration. Weekly refinement to the roadmap. Are we actually going the right direction? Do we need to pause somewhere, invest in like more iterations before we launch a product, or is it the right time to think about that this product is actually ready for market? So there is that strategic work and planning, but there is the hidden side that nobody actually talks about, is whatever your product needs to be successful and there's nobody else that can do it other than you. So triaging issues and trying to understand why one of your customers are saying a bug or an issue before you actually pass it to dev, so you make sure that their time is focused and optimized. There is even like writing a copy for the error message that should show to the user in the screen, and making sure that it's informative enough that they can make a decision based on it, and guide them through how they should use the product. There's like documenting how your feature works for somebody in finance, so they understand if it has like any risk on bills not being delivered. Or so it's very different, and it goes back from like really vision thinking to the smaller nitty-gritty stuff that your product needs to be successful. Again, there is no typical day.
Wow, it sounds like a role of a purple unicorn where you have to interact. There's this cross-functionality element, so you need to understand a little bit about those different kind of roles, and you're the glue that brings them together to launch that product. That's very cool.
What I always think about a product manager is like an orchestrator, where there is like a nice play or like song in the background, and there is somebody trying to organize and like prioritize who should have like a higher tone versus a lower tone. I don't know. I love to use that analogy a lot. It sounds very creative and artistic, I guess.
That's a very beautiful analogy. I can totally, picture it in my head in terms of how, you bring everyone into harmony and just, produce or make that piece happen. Okay, so the other thing that I was actually curious about is, as a product manager, you own the product, and you kind of become like the subject matter expert. Coming into, I think Flip was, one of the first companies where, you got your breakthrough as a product manager. Did you have to have deep, domain in whatever product they're delivering?
So just to give some context, so the first product that I was a product manager for was more in the B2B2C world. I not necessarily had enough context about it, and just to share more, it was a native advertisement for a weekly flyer that you show on like media publisher sites. So think about MSN as an example, where there's like a section for weekly ads or flyers. Same way how you get in print or delivered to your door. So that was like a kind of like an integration in the digital world. When I started, I not necessarily had enough industry knowledge about it. I spent some time, and that knowledge takes some time, to talk to the BD or ask them to just keep me on these calls. I just want to be a listener and try to understand and empathize for that customer and what they need. And there is the other side of the element, is the consumer side, which is like, why do people actually come to these websites to view that content? What makes them come and keep coming to view that content there? So it also took like some understanding on these customer base, and looking at the data and trying to kind of understand their user behavior more as well.
Okay, so it sounds like it's possible to become a product manager in a domain that you don't necessarily need to be an expert in, but you have to work yourself up. And it sounds like you did that before you got into your role. Is that accurate?
So, actually, I did it after, but definitely, I mean, to your point, understanding the industry, understanding your customer increases your chance of success as a product manager. So if you're thinking today about your next move, or if this is your first role as a product manager, always try to be in a product where you can empathize for that customer and understand their main pain points and what they're trying to do. And try as much as possible prioritize these roles over the completely new domains that you don't have much of a context on. Building a context takes months and years and effort to actually get there. So if you're starting, it increases your chances of success if you're starting something you're more familiar with.
That makes sense. What do you love most about being a product manager?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Um, I like working with people, so I love that. What I really love about the role is that you're working across the whole company. So you're working with engineers, data scientists, designers, um, salespeople, marketing, even like customer support, and um, as well as like connecting all these organizations with your leadership, so they can have an idea on like what exactly happening uh, across the company. What I also like about it is that you're bringing most of the times you're bringing technology and business together, and that's the beauty about it, because you're often going to see engineers proud of their well architected platform that they're building, and business is really focusing on like results and revenue. So being that person that really understands both words and strives to actually deliver the best outcome, knowing the two constraints at the same time, I think that's an exciting part of product management. And then also being a person who's driving and at least painting the vision of your product, um, with feedback from like your customers and feedback from leadership and feedback internally on like what can we deliver. That's also a part that excites me about product management.
Wow. And do you need to be technical to become a successful product manager?
I would say it depends. It really depends on the product that you'll be managing. There are products where it's purely it's purely technical project. Sometimes it's infrastructure product, or sometimes it's machine learning product. Well, similar to your point earlier, it really increases your chances of success if you have the knowledge expert. So having a technical background will be something that is more important. For the rest of the industry, so you will often not necessarily need to have a technical background. I mean, having a technical background definitely helps you understand your engineers and speak the same language. But if you also build the skill of asking the right questions from your engineers, and uh, help them to teach you actually how your product was built, and what are the challenges, technical challenges in their day to day that they're facing, that will definitely help you without necessarily having a technical background. I didn't have to go through that channel. I have a technical background myself, but I know one of my colleagues, she's coming from a design background, and her product actually was fairly depend on like good user experience on the B2C world. Um, I learned something interesting from her, is that she learned how to communicate to engineers by asking them, can you teach me how our product works, assuming I'm 5 years old? And then you'll see engineers really striving to simplify a lot of the technical terms into things that are more understandable by somebody who's not technical, and then they're able to speak somehow a similar language.
Wow. So it sounds like, depending on your background, you can actually get into a niche within product management, or you can use that background to your advantage. Whether you're technical, maybe you can be involved in more technical types of products. If you're more on the business side, or maybe even the user experience side, and maybe the front-facing, elements of a product. And you can still use your background as an advantage. So the example you gave us is very beautiful, where that user experience, that product manager with the user experience background actually, played that to her advantage. The fact that she wasn't as technical, and she got them to simplify, the way they communicate around the product and the features. That's very nice. How did your background help you in terms of becoming a product manager?
Um, it did help me earning credibility with my engineers initially, because I didn't necessarily had enough credibility as a product manager when I started working closely with engineers, because I didn't have like a previous experience as a product manager. but I could have easily empathize and understand their word by um, the complexity of what they're delivering, asking them about like different optionalities where we can simplify the product and remove some of the complexity and deliver faster. So having a quicker MVP as an example, that definitely helped me, and also taking some of the technical support from their end. So being some of that funnel for a lot of the technical requests and understanding whether that's an actual issue that needs to be fixed, or it's more of a configuration issue as an example. That definitely helped me as well.
Awesome. And I'm sure you've gotten questions like these. How would a product manager fit in the agile world? There's a lot of buzz around and some confusion around product owner and product manager. And then is the product manager different than a Scrum master? Do you have an answer for that? Like, can you shed some light on that?
It also depends on each industry and company. I've seen companies using similar titles for different meanings, but my perception of it is more like heads and hats sometimes. So sometimes as a product manager, you have to wear a hat where you're the product owner as well, while you're ordering the backlog of tickets for your team and making sure that the requirements are documented very well. There are cases where your role as a product manager doesn't enable you to do and like support the team, be very involved with the team day to day. So you'll find either there is like somebody who's taking on that hat, like an engineering manager, where they make sure everything is in tickets and everything is ordered for the team to deliver and execute. Or you find that there is a dedicated person within the team, like a product owner within an agile environment, that actually is dedicated resource to do that work for you. Scrum Master is closer to ensuring that the execution is going well in terms of budget, resources, and timelines, removing any blockers or obstacles the agile team is facing. You'll find a similar fighter for that role outside the agile environment as a project manager often.
Very nice. And what does your team look like, the ones that you work with?
So right now I'm a product manager for 3 teams in Toronto. I work with around 20 engineers across the 3 teams, and each team has an individual mission. They're all under one organization of the product, but each team is focused on delivering one different value for the customer. My team also has data scientist resources and design, working with them to make sure that customers have the best user experience, and we can validate and take decisions based on data instead of intuition in a lot of cases. I do work closely with sales and business development and marketing. I am on Instacart, but I am more on the B2B to C side. So I'm product manager for their ads organization in Toronto. So I work mostly with CPGs, helping them reach their consumers on Instacart and influence their purchases of specific brands. Yeah, so that's it. I mean, in some occasions, I need to work even beyond that, working with legal departments and the company if I'm launching a credit card feature, as an example, making sure that the terms and conditions are involved in my product. I do work as well with customer support. So every time I'm launching a new feature, I make sure that they understand how the feature works and they can explain it to my customer when my customers are facing any issues.
Wow, that's a lot of people that you work with. What is your advice for folks who want to get into product management in terms of training or just getting their foot in the door?
Trainings are good, and reading books are good. There are a lot of good books that they can get exposure to what the role is and what's a good product is. I can give an example of inspired by Marty Kagan is one of my favorite, the Lean Startup as well, and there are so many books that they can really get exposure to the role itself. In terms, there are two ways that you actually can get into the role today, and this is what I give as an advice for everybody who's reaching, asking the same question. You either find an associate product manager role. The downside, the good side is that you're going to save a lot of time by niching for that role that's specifically for people who don't have an experience, and have somebody to guide you while you're building your experience. The downside maybe of that role is that you're actually missing also building other experiences that might be very helpful for you when you become a product manager. The other option for you is to start somewhere that you're familiar with, and try to pivot your way there. It gives you some perspective and gives you some experience before you get into that role. Definitely, even though it will probably take a bit longer for any person to get to the role at the end. Again, both has pros and cons for each approach, so it depends on like everyone's preference. If I want to give like a general advice, I advise people who's really interested in product management to work on their transferable skills. These are the skills that it's not necessary becoming a product manager, but it increases your success once you become product manager. And I summarize them in a term called COPE, which is communication, working on your organizational influence and leadership skills. P is prioritization, so making sure that you actually can prioritize work and understand the impact of what you're delivering. And the last one is empathy for customer and team. So try to be in a role where you're actually working on these skills, and try to take these skills as a advantage points for you when you move to the product management role.
Wow, I've never come across that acronym. That's very brilliant. Well, thank you, Nour, so much. You've provided us a lot of valuable, advice, and your experience is amazing. Instacart is lucky to have you on their team. And I wish you luck in all your future endeavors in your product management path. I'm sure you're, going to progress beautifully. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Neda, for reaching out. It was a pleasure talking to you today. Looking forward to hear more from you on like the career coaching.
Awesome. Thank you so much.